My name is Vreth-Kol, and I made a mistake. A terrible, embarrassing, galaxy-altering mistake. I am a senior observer of the Dominion of Skaar, a civilization so advanced that we measure time in epochs and laugh at species still fumbling with fire. I have catalogued 214 sentient races across 47 star systems. I have witnessed the rise of the Queln Collective, survived the silent war of the Duro Drift, and once successfully argued with a black hole, which, for the record, I won. And yet, none of that, not a single moment of it, prepared me for what crawled out of the third planet of a thoroughly unremarkable yellow star, somewhere in the boring, backwater curl of the Milky Way. They called themselves humans. I did not take them seriously. Allow me to be honest about that. When my subordinate, a young Skaar drone named Pelk 7, first flagged the species for my review, I laughed so hard that I cracked 2 of my secondary respiratory chambers. The report read like a comedy script. Soft bodies. No exoskeleton. No venom glands. Virtually no natural armor. No sonar. No enhanced vision spectrum. Nothing. They lived for roughly 80 of their planet's rotations around their star, which, by Skaar standards, is the blink of an eye. They spent roughly 1/3 of that time completely unconscious. 1/3. Just lying there. Vulnerable. And they called it rest. Pelk 7 had flagged them under the category of primitive biological curiosity. I signed off on it without a second glance. A grave error. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 of their decades after our initial observation. Our deep space listening posts began picking up transmissions from their solar system. Radio waves, nothing sophisticated, just warbling signals bouncing off their atmosphere like a child throwing rocks at a pond. But here is the thing that made my senior analyst, Giovanni, stand up from her console with an expression I had never seen on a Scarface before. And believe me, Scarfaces are not built for surprise. The transmissions were everywhere. Not one source. Not 10. Not 100. Millions of them. Simultaneously. All at once. All overlapping, screaming, singing, arguing, broadcasting jokes, and, inexplicably, sharing recordings of small 4-legged animals doing clumsy things, apparently for the sole purpose of making each other produce the loud, rhythmic exhale they used as an emotional release signal. What are they doing? Pelk 7 asked. I have no idea, I said. Which, again, was something I had never said before. We sent a probe. Standard Class 4 observation unit, invisible to electromagnetic detection, gravity neutral, the kind of thing we had dropped into hundreds of systems without incident. It reached the third planet, entered low orbit, extended its sensor array, and then went completely silent. No explosion, no damage signal, no farewell transmission. It simply stopped responding. Like something had reached up and swatted it out of existence with a casual, disinterested hand. We sent a second probe. Same result. Then a third, but this time we equipped it with a recorder that would broadcast in real time, so we could see exactly what happened before the signal cut out. The footage, my friends, the footage was something else entirely. The probe entered the atmosphere, descended through cloud layers, swept over a dense urban construction zone, and then, with a clarity that made Giovanni make that same unreadable face again, something on the ground looked up. Not a building sensor. Not a defense array. A single, small, soft, completely unarmored human, standing on a rooftop, holding a black rectangular device, pointing it directly at our probe with what we later identified as photographic intent. The probe cut out 2 seconds later. Not from a weapon. Not from a signal scrambler. The post-mortem analysis showed that a perfectly ordinary civilian communication satellite had drifted into the probe's path, and the collision had destroyed it instantly. An accident. Completely unintentional. The human had simply been taking a picture of the sky at the exact wrong moment, and by some unfathomable chain of coincidence, had been the last thing our probe ever saw. That night, if you can call it night on a deep space observation platform, I called an emergency senior council meeting. I presented the data. I presented the footage. I presented the transmission analysis, the probe loss reports, and a preliminary behavioral breakdown compiled by our best xenopsychologists, most of whom had requested reassignment by the time I finished reading it. The council looked at the data for a very long time. Then the eldest council member, Reen Vash, who had survived 3 galactic wars and personally negotiated the Queln Peace Accord, cleared all 4 of her throats and said, very quietly, "Are they afraid of anything?" I checked the full psychological profile. I read every line twice. And then I looked up and said the words that officially ended my career as someone who had never lost sleep over a primitive species. We have not found anything yet. The council chamber went completely silent. And somewhere, 37 light years away, a human was laughing at a video of a small animal falling off a table. So, the council decided to make contact. I want to be very clear about how that decision was made, because history, if the Dominion of Skaar survives long enough to record it, deserves accuracy. The vote was not unanimous. Vreth-Kol abstained. Pelk 7, who technically had no voting rights but submitted a written objection anyway, used the phrase catastrophically inadvisable, which I thought showed real growth for someone who had once called the humans a curiosity. But the majority voted yes. We were a civilization of 2 billion, spanning 9 star systems, armed with weapons that could rearrange the geography of moons. What, exactly, were we afraid of? This question, I now understand, was the wrong one to ask. We transmitted the contact signal on a frequency we had never used before, one mathematically derived from universal constants, a sequence of prime numbers folded into a geometric pattern that every advanced civilization eventually stumbles upon, the kind of signal that says, clearly and without confusion, we are intelligent. We know you are intelligent. Please respond in kind. They responded in 4 of their hours. Not with a careful, measured reply. Not with a diplomatic overture. Not even with a simple acknowledgement. They responded with 612 separate transmissions, simultaneously, from 612 different locations on their planet. Some were governments. Some were research institutions. Some were, and I reviewed this personally because I did not believe Juavo's initial report, private individuals who had built their own signal receivers in structures they called garages. 612 responses. In 4 hours. From a species that had only known we existed for 4 hours. One transmission, originating from a cold northern landmass, was simply a human making the loud rhythmic exhale sound for 11 straight minutes. We did not know if that was a threat.
We chose to proceed. The formal introduction took 3 of their years. Language translation alone consumed half that time, because human language, it turned out, was not one language. It was hundreds. With dialects. And slang. And words that changed meaning depending on tone, context, facial expression, and, inexplicably, whether or not the speaker was eating at the time. Our translation team, led by the legendary linguist Vreth-Kol, filed for separate requests for early retirement during this period. Vreth-Kol herself sent me a personal message at the end of year 2 that simply read, "They have a word that means both hello and goodbye depending on the region. I am going home."
She did not go home. She stayed. Because, like the rest of us, she could not look away. By the time proper communication was established, we had learned several things about humans that our initial behavioral profile had failed to capture. The first was that they were, genuinely and without performance, curious about absolutely everything. Not strategically curious, the way the Queln Collective was curious, cataloging information for tactical advantage. Not cautiously curious, the way younger species usually were when meeting a civilization thousands of years older. Humans were curious the way a fire is hot. Constantly. In every direction. Without apparent concern for what the answer might turn out to be. The second thing we learned was that they had a concept called fun. We had no direct equivalent in Skaar culture. We had recreation, which was structured. We had leisure, which was scheduled. But fun, as the humans explain it, was something you did for no reason other than the fact that you wanted to, and that it made you feel the loud rhythmic exhale. They applied this concept to a staggering range of activities, including, but not limited to, throwing themselves off tall structures attached to elastic cords, sliding down mountains on thin flat boards at speeds that should have been medically prohibited, and voluntarily consuming food so aggressively spiced that it triggered physical pain responses and then doing it again immediately and calling it a good time. When I relayed this information to Vreth-Kol, she was quiet for a long moment. They hurt themselves for entertainment, she asked. Recreationally, I confirmed. And they enjoy it. They film it and share it with each other, I said. For encouragement. Vreth-Kol looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as the face of someone who has just realized the thing they were not afraid of is the thing they should have been afraid of all along. And that was before we found out about the wars. Not the wars they were fighting now. The ones they had already finished. The ones that had ended so badly, so completely, so at a scale of self-inflicted devastation that entire generations had been reshaped by them, and yet, somehow, they had come out the other side. Still here. Still loud. Still filming animals falling off furniture and calling it the best thing they had seen all week. Pelk 7 found me in the observation bay that evening, staring at the blue and green dot on the long-range display. He stood beside me for a while without speaking, which was unusual for him. "Sir," he finally said, "do you think they know how strange they are?" I thought about the 612 simultaneous transmissions. I thought about Vortess and her retirement request. I thought about the human on the rooftop, casually photographing the sky, accidentally destroying our probe, completely unaware that anything had happened at all. "No," I said. "I do not think they do." Pelk 7 nodded slowly. "Is that better or worse?" I did not answer him, because the honest answer, the one that had been keeping me awake for 3 years, was that it did not matter. Better or worse was a calculation built for species that you could predict. Humans were not a calculation. They were a variable. The kind of variable that does not sit quietly in an equation but crawls out of it, looks around, asks 17 questions, invents something dangerous for fun, and then laughs the whole way through. We never did find out what they were afraid of. But I have a feeling, and I am a being who does not typically deal in feelings, that whatever it is afraid of them too.